Hi, everyone. Hope you're doing well, and thank you very much for joining us today. I'm Nikhil Pillai, and I'm a PhD student at the Birmingham Centre for Railway Research and Education. I'm also the chairman of the West Midlands chapter of the YRP. So today we are delivering this event in collaboration with Women in Rail. And we have Alex Burrows, who's the managing director of the Birmingham Centre for Railway Research, who's going to talk to us about innovation in the rail industry. So I'm quickly talk a bit about the YRP because some of you are from Women in Rail, and then I'll hand over to Shona, who's from Women in Rail, to talk a bit about Women in Rail so that YRP attendees can get to know a bit more about Women in Rail as an organization. And then I'll hand over to Alex to continue with the talk. Regarding the organization of this talk, as you guys already know that it's just going to be me and Alex who are going to share the video. You're all going to be muted, but you have the opportunity to interact by using the question box that you can see on your screen. So if you have any questions, please type them in the question box. And after Alex is done with his talk, I'll come back to that and ask Alex your questions. Okay. So with regard to the YRP, we are an organization that aim to promote, inspire, and develop the next generation of railway professionals. We do this by organizing different networking and development events that caters to the entire rail industry. And yeah, today's talk is a part of that so that professionals from around the industry can get to know about different sectors in rail. So if you're someone who works for a TOC, then you can get to know about the infrastructure managers and so on and so forth. So yes, becoming a YRP member is free. So if you are a young career professional who wants to become a member of the YRP, please log on to our website and sign up to be a member, and you'll get to be a part of much more exciting things in the future. Okay, now I'll hand over to Shona so that she can introduce Women in Rail quickly. Over to you, Shona.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Shona Clive. I'm chair of Women in Rail Scotland. So I'll speak slowly because I do have a Scottish accent, so you might not be able to understand me. I'm delighted to say it's beautiful weather in Scotland. It's been horrible, but it's lovely now. I'll keep this short. Women in Rail is a fabulous organisation that's been created, gosh, what's in its 6th year now? It was created to improve diversity across the rail sector and support women through their careers and encourage more women to join the sector to address the gender imbalance. I've been chair since 2018 and I love it. It's a great bunch of people. I think there's about 4,000 members just now. And if you haven't joined, it's really easy to join. It is free. You just go to the womeninrail.org website and there's a page that you can join and you get access to brilliant events like this that get arranged. There's a fantastic mentoring program, and there are things like the Women in Rail Awards where we celebrate brilliant people across the rail sector, not just women, men too. So I'd encourage you to have a good look and join if you can. In fact, please do join. We'd love to have more members and spread the word. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Shona. Now over on to our speaker, Alex Burrows. So Alex is the managing director of BCRRE, and he's held various leadership positions in the railway industry, including companies like Alstom. So I'll hand over now to Alex so that he can start his talk on innovation in the rail industry. Thanks, Alex.
Thank you, Nikhil, and thank you, Shona. And yes, so welcome everyone. My name's Alex. Thank you for the introduction. And I had my birthday yesterday, actually, Nikhil. So I'm 1 year even further away from being able to be a member of Young Rail Professionals, or be a young member of Young Rail Professionals, perhaps. Anyway, thank you very much for inviting me to speak today. I'm really grateful for that, and I'm particularly pleased to be able to support young rail professionals and women in rail. And I might come on to that subject towards the end of my talk, actually, why I'm particularly pleased. It's a good reason, honestly. So I've got a lot to get through, so I won't babble on. I'll get straight down to this. So Birmingham Centre for Rail Research Education, hopefully a number of you are aware of us. We're the largest specialist railway research education and innovation centre in Europe, with over 170 researchers and staff, with a number of very good PhD students. Nikhil is one of them, of course, and it's great to see Nikhil and many of our students out in the rail industry already playing a role, playing a part and having impact, which is fantastic. So this is my agenda. This is what I want to get through today. It was great to have a nice broad topic to enable me to go on for hours on end potentially. So please do rein me in if I go on too long. So I'll start off with some context. We want to talk around innovation more broadly, and then innovation in the railway in particular. And then we have the three topics: decarbonisation, digitalisation, and coronavirus, COVID-19. So that's an awful lot to talk about, Nikhil. So I will try and keep this brief, so there's time for questions at the end. And obviously, I will finish on an optimistic note. So some context then. So innovation is talked about a lot. It's seen as either something that's very on trend, something very important, something very relevant, something cool and fancy and exciting. Or sometimes it's seen by the grumpy skeptics as a buzzword with that's actually meaningless. And the answer really is more towards the former, thank goodness, than the latter. So innovation is really around a new method, a new idea, or the use and application of those new ideas and methods. Around that as well then, so decarbonisation and digitalisation we're going to talk about as well, and I just want to get our agreed taxonomy out there from the start. Decarbonisation, reducing greenhouse gas emissions, in this context produced as a result of rail transport. And digitalisation is the use of new digital technologies to generate improvements and benefits, and in particular I would focus on not on converting something from an analog system to a set of zeros and ones, but actually thinking more broadly around what that will actually mean in terms of the service offering that you have, and you can imagine how relevant that is to rail. And I thought, given you've got University of Birmingham labels there, we do hypotheses. So these are the three I want to ground for us all to start with. So first hypothesis is that rail is a critical component part of a decarbonised transport network, and that's particularly relevant in the current time with coronavirus, of course. The urgent need to decarbonise to achieve net zero carbon puts the railway at a major advantage in delivering low carbon transport. Okay, so that's my first hypothesis. My second hypothesis is that the increasing penetration of digitalisation into products and processes brings huge opportunities. And I think you can all think of examples where digitalisation has transformed offerings, and you think of music, think of television, think of media broadly as a great example. The railway can benefit from digitalisation if it supports and focuses innovation efforts strategically on the outcomes it wants to achieve. And my third hypothesis is that the impact of COVID-19 on rail can still be determined by the actions taken now. And what I mean by that is that I think, and this is UK specific, I should emphasise, is that the impact of coronavirus on rail is unclear at the moment, because I think the decisions that are being taken and will be taken over the coming months are going to really set the tone of what happens. I think it will be negative if we don't encourage public transport and mitigate risk, but it should be positive, and it should be positive because of the previous two hypotheses, actually, that rail is a low carbon mass transit mode that can exploit technology effectively. Okay, so a bit around innovation then. So I want to talk around innovation, frame innovation as a process or a cycle, where you start off with fundamental research, your ideas, your initial thoughts, you know, the light bulb moment. If you look at that chart on the right, unhelpfully, we're going to start at the bottom and work our way up. So what we call technology readiness levels, which are a level you can pretty much assign to the development of an idea through the innovation process to actually becoming a physical deployment of that idea. So we have the area we'd call research, TRL levels 1 to 3 at the bottom in orange there. So basic principles observed, formulating a concept, and then developing, building your proof of concept to test it, to give it an outline idea of, could this actually be viable? You then move through the development phase, so the D in the R&D, 4 to 6 TRL levels, so validating your technology, and then providing a demonstration of it. And some of you may know about, a lot of you probably heard about us and our hydrogen train, but that's currently around TRL 6 to 7. We've demonstrated it on a test track. We're taking it out onto the main line, in fact, in the next few weeks, for testing in an operational environment. So that's where we hit TRL 7. And you'll see at the top there in the darker blue, the TRL level 7 to 9 around deployment. And that's really where you might, what you'd focus on around 6 to 8, say, is the actual innovation, traditional form of innovation, which is the application of research into the real world. So really, you can talk around the innovation process as going from the big ideas to rolling it out into the market, into the real world, to actually derive those benefits, to deliver those improvements and derive those benefits. And market entry, of course, is your objective with innovation, and obviously commercial success. So that's broadly how we could frame innovation. And then putting it in some context, I always see innovation from the supply side and the demand side. So from the supply side, we're talking around what we call a technology push, which is the idea, the actual tangible benefit that you're looking to generate. And that's really, from our side, we talk about the rail supply industry, so your manufacturers, your tier 1 contractors, those people, plus the innovators and us in the universities. And then from the demand side is what we call the market pull, and that's the need requirement. And for every great idea, if it's not needed, it's just not going to happen, is it? Quite simply. And from the demand side in the rail industry, we talk around government, we talk about TOCs and FOCs, train operators, freight operating companies, infrastructure managers, HS1, Transport for London, Crossrail, HS2, and of course customers, passengers. And so from an innovation perspective, I think it's really important we always focus both on the supply side of the idea and the demand side of the demand for that idea, and bring it into reality. And just moving that on a stage then, when we talk around the innovation process and looking at it from a supply and demand perspective, that idea is going to go through a lot of challenges and have to get over a number of barriers in order to go from great idea to great product or service on the market. And 4 of those biggest challenges are around funding, risk, procurement, and need. So paying for the idea to turn it into, develop it, the risk, and what I mean by this is the appetite for taking on the risk of investing resource, and that's financial resource, people resource, into making that idea happen. And there's also reputational risk in that as well, isn't there? It could be a great idea that could actually be the worst idea in the world, and you don't realise until you've embarrassed yourself. So there's a lot to unpack within that element of risk. From a procurement perspective, and these now focus on demand side, of course, the need has got to not just be an accepted need, but a need that is ready to go out to the market and buy a solution to it. And that need's got to be clearly defined. It's got to actually be able to say, right, this is what we want to achieve. This is the outcome we want to get to. And that's then got to marry up with your idea, with your innovation. And so the innovation process really captures a number of those technology readiness levels, but it should also include those barriers you have to hurdle along the way, both from the supply side and the demand side. So innovation in rail more specifically. So how can the rail industry actually support and enable innovation? We talk about an innovation culture in rail, and I'd certainly be interested to hear from you listening at the moment what your perceptions are of the rail industry's attitude to innovation and perceptions of innovation. But I think the most important thing is to remember why innovate? Why do we want to innovate? What are we actually looking to achieve? And what we're looking to achieve are outcomes. We're looking to get to a better place at the end of this. And what I'd like to think of as broadly covering most of the outcomes we're looking to achieve with innovation in the rail are these 5. It's around solving challenges. And challenge-led innovation is something I've certainly worked on for a number of years, and I think that's you're beginning to see more focus on that, which is actually to remind ourselves that if we want to supply innovation, if we want to develop innovation, then we must remember the demand side of the market pull for that as well. And we have a number of very clear challenges in the industry, and I think actually decarbonisation, digitalisation, and coronavirus are 3 very good challenges we're looking to solve actually when it comes to innovating with a purpose. Effectively using state-of-the-art technologies is my second area, and some of the grumpy old skeptics might think, well, why? What does that actually mean? And this is actually a very important part around innovation as well. on one hand, it's around getting improved performance, around reducing costs. It's actually optimizing what you do by being open to the adoption and testing and developing of new technologies. But on the other hand, there's something even more fundamental than that. On the macro level, rail is very good at being that grumpy one and saying, why do we need to use state-of-the-art technologies? What's the point? But automotive's doing it, aerospace is doing it, defence is doing it, lots of people are doing it and are using state-of-the-art technologies, and they're investing in developing those state-of-the-art technologies and deploying them into their systems, into their products and offerings. And this is very important. It's not just important for customers who want to know that they are getting the best service. It's very important if we want the next generations coming through to be attracted to working in our industry. Because of course, if people are going to think, well, actually I can do a more interesting job exploring and developing new technologies in automotive, I'll go and work in automotive. Not really ideal for the longevity of the rail industry, and having all the great people that we have wanting to stay with us rather than going and testing their ideas and their talents elsewhere. The other three are perhaps more prosaic, but fundamentally important, of course, to rail and why we want to innovate. We want to meet evolving customer needs and expectations. Okay, customers, for example, want one app, not 1,000 apps on their mobile phone. Customers also expect decent, up-to-date, reliable, relevant information that's actually going to help them get from A to B, which, let's remember, is why we travel. Some people do travel actually for the joy of being on a train, but on the whole, our customers are there to get somewhere without worrying about how. They just want it to be easy, simple, affordable, reliable. Reducing operating costs and increasing efficiency, along with improving performance, safety, capacity, reliability. These are the outcomes we want to achieve for a more efficient, more productive industry, and for reminding us actually the benefits of train travel from a customer perspective, and why we're in it to provide those train services, because it's a valuable form of transport, of mass transport, for getting people particularly into and between cities. So those are the outcomes we want to get to, and this is why we innovate. This is what we're looking to support. So within that group, within those packages, are really where the need is, where the demand is. Okay, and just give some context around innovation in rail. This was a recent innovation survey from the Rail Industry Association, which I found really interesting. In fact, it's possibly far too interesting, and I just wanted to pick out four questions and answers from it. So on this side, you can see the first two questions. Firstly, how important is it for the British rail industry to be innovative? And 84% said very important, and the other 16% said quite important. So I think there's a fairly clear demand for innovation in an abstract sense. Innovation is recognised as being necessary for the UK rail industry, so that's a good thing. Perhaps not so good on question two is how innovative do you believe the British railway industry is at present? And this was November 2019, as you can see. And it was rather unfortunate that no one said extremely innovative. 4% said very innovative, 46% quite innovative, and 47% hardly innovative, and 3% said not innovative at all. How terrible is that? We don't know who those 3% are yet, but we are still looking for them. In all seriousness, we aren't looking for them. That's a concern, but there's a real perception issue here. And to my mind, there is a gap between what we think we're capable of and what we're doing. And that gap, I think, is manifested quite clearly in the fact that the rail industry is innovative, to my mind, and I want to hopefully push that reasoning through in the next few minutes. But actually, we don't think we're as innovative as we really are. And actually, part of the reason might come down to these two questions as well. And these were the policies and process that have the greatest impact on innovation. And you can see procurement stands out there clearly, along with product approval. So what you might call it's demand side issues from procurement, but also supply side around actually the difficulty, the complexity of innovating, of being able to get your new product, your big idea through the complexity into market. And on that second one, question 8 there, you can see availability of innovation funding has a major impact on the facilities and resources that are available to support innovation. I don't know what that 19% was for other, by the way. Apologies for that, which is a pain. But also 22% around testing and trialing facilities. And again, you've got this supply side focus on there are there are issues, there are real barriers in the innovation process from a supply side perspective in particular. And what that indicates very strongly to me is that there is clearly latent supply of capability, of resource, of desire to innovate. And actually, it's the challenges, those barriers within the innovation process are causing us the problems in terms of getting that, not just taking innovation through market, but even perceiving us to be innovative. And I think what I draw from that, and I'll come on to this in a bit, is that the real problem is we aren't enabling, we aren't facilitating innovation. We know we should be, but somewhere along the line, we haven't actually got the processes and support mechanisms and barriers under control that are going to actually truly enable innovation. And to my mind, that sits somewhere around government, I'm afraid to say, but it's really around how the shape of the industry and the shape and role of the relevant actors in making it either easier or more difficult to innovate. And I fear at the moment there's a lean towards more difficult. So that's my context. Now we're going to hit the three challenges because these are big and there's a lot within them. So firstly, decarbonisation. Again, rather unfortunately, in 2016, transport became the largest emitting sector of greenhouse gas emissions in the UK. And as you can see, look, on that bar chart, you can see we've stayed fairly constant in terms of our greenhouse gas emissions over the last 30 years. But really, that energy sector did really good work, which is actually a really good thing, of course. Did fantastic work in decarbonising, and what you've seen is that they've really worked very hard in reduction on coal and oil and significant growth, particularly in renewables, clean renewables, offshore wind and solar in particular, a bit of hydro, a bit of onshore. But the share of electricity generation from renewable sources has significantly increased, and that has boosted energy's position in terms of emissions really healthily, to the point where they've pulled down to second highest emitter now, below transport. Now, of course, that has a really good, does actually have a good knock-on impact for the railway, which I'll come on to in a second, because of course it means that our electric trains are using relatively cleaner energy. So good news. Just to move on though, just a couple more charts. Sorry, you can see though, transport's bad when it comes to emissions, but rail is very good. Rail is very good indeed, and you can see the top left bar chart, rail just right there at the bottom underneath the bus, in terms of actual emissions being generated. Sorry. And just by mode, the bar charts 1990 and 2018 comparatively, rail doesn't even feature. We're stuck in the other, that grey section, rather than being split out, because we are a small emitter, which is obviously pleasing, but it means there's always more we can do in that front. And just a reminder, actually, in terms of the modal share, and these figures are just for England from 2018, the railway, 2% of journeys in the UK, sorry, in England, were undertaken by rail. But 9% of the distance travelled was by rail. So we are a longer distance journeys, predominantly taken by rail, which is a good thing when you set it against the share of emissions that we have, which is around the 2% mark. So we're about right for number of trips, but actually distance-wise, we are low carbon, and that's a really important point. So when it comes to delivering decarbonisation, it's around what can rail do? Where do we want to innovate? We want to supply more capacity. Okay, that's the aim of the railway. We take cars, passenger cars, and we take freight goods off the roads. We put them on rail. Rail is a low carbon solution for transport, only emitting less than 2%. And we can carry large volumes, and strategically we're very important because we have the access into cities. We can put large numbers of people, large numbers of freight into cities and urban areas cleanly, reliably, sustainably. In terms of innovating, though, we need to focus on split it out perhaps into rolling stock and infrastructure. So for rolling stock side, there is obviously a lot of focus around the decarbonisation of rolling stock. Obviously, electrification is a very clean way of delivering clean tractive power. We're only 38% electrified across our UK network, and that covers 60–70% of passenger journeys, which is fantastic. But it means we still have lots of emitting diesels at the moment on the network, although we have the option to develop and deliver hydrogen and battery trains onto the UK network to replace diesel trains more quickly, recognising that the chances of us wiring the whole network in the next 30 years it's not impossible, but it's highly unlikely, and I wouldn't want to be giving any promises to anyone that you'd have the whole railway network in the UK wired by 2050, if ever. So we should be looking at other sources of clean electric traction. And so hydrogen and battery are going to be relevant, and I suspect in the next few weeks we will hear from the Department for Transport and from Network Rail more news from them on this subject and how we are going to electrify, and I mean electrify as in overhead line equipment and self-propelled electric trains when it comes to the future for decarbonising the railway. Now, also around infrastructure, and this is a part that perhaps is ignored or forgotten about, is the embedded carbon values within the development and delivery of railway infrastructure, your concrete sleepers, all of your equipment, your ongoing maintenance, yellow plants, of course, diesel as well. So all of that needs to be electrified to support the delivery and ongoing maintenance of infrastructure as well. And it's really important when we talk about decarbonising the railway that we have our story straight, that we aren't just looking at the trains, at the rolling stock side, that we are looking at designing sustainable infrastructure for the railway as well, the design, the materials used, and the ongoing maintenance. Just quickly touch next on digitalisation. So digital systems broadly, I think we all know, and actually I put the example here around what is digital and digitalisation. So digitization is, for example, how when music went from analog recordings, tape, cassette, the cassettes, records, LPs, vinyl, that stuff, and moved across to CD. So turning it from an analog recording to a digital recording, lots of ones and zeros that are used to transmit the information to produce the audible sound. And it's really not around, I'm going to go bottom up on this slide, apologies. Digitalization isn't just around focusing on making an analog thing digital. It's around the actual broader offering, how you develop a business model for the digitalized offering, and what that actually means in terms of being more creative, innovating with how those services can be paid for. And you can see here that the move from CD, we had our iPods in whenever that was. I think I can see the Killers on there. Look, Day and Age. That was about 2009, I think. Great album as well. But then I'm showing my age, aren't I? So we moved from CDs to iPods, and that was still about owning your own music and somewhere to store it. But what digitalization then did is it offers a different model, a different service model for how you buy and consume that music. And so certainly, if I wasn't presenting this to young rail professionals, but to all the old crusties, they'd be like, what the hell is that? That of course is Spotify, and that is your subscription service for streaming music. And quite simply, the digitalization opportunity for rail is around how we develop these new technologies and how we deploy them onto the railway and provide them in such a way that we can do more interesting things around how these services are bought, how they're consumed, how they're paid for, how we can make it affordable to improve and develop services. So the innovation when it comes to digitalization is both relevant to the technology we use and to the business model we use to provide those services. And so here I've got at the top four rapidly developing technologies that are going to be transforming, already are transforming the railway as we know it. I won't go into too much detail on each of them. Internet of Things, essentially imagine devices that can speak to themselves, not in an automated way, not in a sentient way either, but that they can inform each other using information that when transmitted allows a decision making to happen within the devices rather than needing a human intervention. Cloud computing, this is very much around big storage of information, and why this is relevant is of course the amount of data we're generating from our trains. It creates huge amounts of data which has huge amounts of information in, but we have to capture all of that information and be able to hold on to it and then be able to process it in order to create the value from it. And in tandem with big data analytics, we then have the power to process that data, that information, and turn it into knowledge. So we use the power of cloud computing with the power of analytics to be able to process these vast amounts of information, creating knowledge from it that then allows us to develop services that can provide real benefit to operators and to passengers. And we could think of some examples around that. For example, there are a number of clever services popping up whereby through an app or actually through WhatsApp, you can get up-to-date information, not just on a pre-planned journey, but actually on what your alternatives are. Be they due to cancellations or be they due to hot weather and not wanting to cycle, so instead jumping on a bus somewhere. Sorry, I should be talking about trains, carry on. Automation and robotics, fourth technology, and I should say all of these. We are at BCRRE very focused in this area because digital systems is one of our specialist areas. Automation and robotics is a major opportunity for the railway. I'm often told I should be thinking more around how we could clean trains using robots. And I always want to think around robots doing far more cool things, but actually that is precisely the point. It's around creating those operating efficiencies that allow the railway to run a better, more reliable, more affordable service. And that's what we should be focused on. So those are the four big technologies that are coming. And I'm really pleased to say that they've all motivated significant R&D activity, R&D spend, and our R&D research and development activity across original equipment manufacturers, your big train manufacturers, Siemens, Alstom, Bombardier, Hitachi, through SMEs, your small to medium-sized enterprises, through us in the universities, in Birmingham in particular, of course, and through startups as well. So a number of startups who come with technological expertise and who are looking for a relevant area, relevant industry where this technology could be used to create real difference. And I'm really pleased we at BCRRE, we work very hard to attract these startups to come and collaborate with us, and we provide them with that help, that domain knowledge and expertise, and the academic expertise to support their ideas and to help them work through that innovation process to turn their ideas into hopefully successful products. Just talking a bit around digitalisation, I like to think of it. I don't know if this is coming from a legal background or something. I mean, it's not an adversarial approach necessarily, but see things in two sides. And so on the operations side, we have the digitalisation is going to be providing connected railways, whereas from a customer facing side, we're talking around connected passengers. And so from an operator side, what the big change is, we're moving from reactive to predictive. And what I mean by that, a really good example is where in a previous life, we would be a company I used to work for. We would be looking at trains. I wouldn't be looking at trains. Colleagues would be looking at trains for maintenance and service. And you're really looking for a problem. You've had a report of maybe some squeal or some bearings or something. There's a problem in there, and it's coming. We better try to see if we can fix it. What we can do now with sensors, with data, and being able to capture that data in real time and to be able to process it so we can understand what the data is telling us and generate a solution, is that we can address problems before they actually cause an issue. And by an issue, I mean a train having to be taken out of service because it's failed. So more reliable trains, more reliable services, hopefully better provision for the passenger. We also can use new techniques, new data-driven techniques like traffic management to have a systems view of how train services are working. And that is so important, not just in terms of managing the day-to-day network and the services that are being provided in real time, but we can actually use artificial intelligence to understand how a network is operating, and we can optimize that network. And we can not just optimize it against the current state of play, but we can also understand what factors are going to be driving demand at certain times in certain places, or are going to create an impact, so a variable like the weather, in order to then mitigate that before it actually happens and creates a problem. Then from a customer facing perspective around customer connected passengers, and I think I'd be preaching to the converted to say the importance of dynamic information, of not just relying on a paper timetable and then turning up at a platform and hoping a train turns up, but actually the whole again, it's that systems view. But what we might focus on, the door-to-door journey, the whole point of actually why we travel is to go from where we are to where we want to be, right? So my objective is to get there, not to faff around with the journey. that's where this type of technology can make a real difference in terms of planning and undertaking the journey and getting there in the best possible state, in order to then say, sit down and provide a really great webinar for people. Just an example. But we can also be more accurate around the information, and we can provide relevant information. So instead of that just one block of mass of printed information, we can personalize it. And that's a big trend, isn't it, from a passenger perspective, is around having that personalized information, so you don't have to wade through vast quantities of uselessness to get to the nugget of information you're actually looking for. And we can provide better, broader solutions as well, so relevant ticket, relevant catering opportunities, comfort level that you're looking for. This can all be done, and this is the opportunities we have, and the opportunities to innovate. And this, I would say, it's a pretty blank canvas when it comes to how you can turn these ideas into reality, and what the market's actually looking like. So we know in any kind of market saturation from exploiting this technology whatsoever. So it's a great space to innovate in. My final point there for the customer is actually one of my call to arms is around integrating rail with the wider transport network. And I have already said this several times, but just to re-emphasize, rail is one hopefully major part of virtually every journey, certainly every long distance journey. But if rail isn't integrated with the before and after parts, then we are missing a massive trick in terms of the customer, the passenger experience. And with that's something digitalisation can definitely do from a connected passenger perspective, which is to really plug rail into the as the backbone of the whole journey. And it's a great opportunity to do so. And I guess I would certainly hope to be seeing a lot more effort in plugging rail in with the wider transport network. So around delivering digitalisation, this is my view around the outcomes we're looking to achieve with innovation and digitalisation. And it's around transporting people and goods safely and securely. It's around that passenger experience. It's around operating efficiency. It's about optimising costs and also the infrastructure you're using. So the sweet spot in terms of the number of trains you're actually running to manage your costs effectively. And it's around increasing capacity ideally without having to build new infrastructure where possible to make it affordable, but using it to its best ability. Right, third one, impact of COVID. So first of all, obviously, none of us know anything really in this regard. There's an awful lot happening and it's live. From a strategic perspective, I think my big issue is around bringing back that demand for rail. Obviously, it's disappointing here in the UK that the government's talking around public transport, low down the list. There is a balance, isn't there, between the need for social distancing, but also respecting public and personal health, but with recognising we've still got climate change existing, and we can't just tell everyone to get in their cars because, one, it will be very polluting, obviously, and two, everyone does not have a car, quite simply, and that's a very simple point to be made for public transport, particularly here in a city like Birmingham. And what I really want to emphasise is the need to ensure there's no conflict between the need for an economic stimulus to bring back the recovery, while the fact we are enjoying, I look out my window right now, see people cycling and walking past on a residential street in North Birmingham. We've had major benefits from a lockdown in terms of the reduction in car transport, but we are watching car use going up every day now, and that would be a huge shame, and it would be a missed trick for rail in particular if we weren't to focus ourselves on how we might mitigate the risks so that we can bring rail capacity back safely for passengers and prevent that need for gridlock on the roads to ensue. And quite simply, cities and towns rely on public transport. Cars plus active travel, micromobility, e-scooters, bikes, they're not sufficient of moving the numbers of people around that exist that require public transport to get to and from work every day, as one example. So public transport has got a role and will have a role after COVID, and we've got to make sure that role is bigger than ever when we focus our minds once again, hopefully, on the particularly massive long-term issue of climate change. And it's a practical one to me, because rail has real benefits in terms of we can actually develop and implement innovation rapidly and roll it out onto trains. We have the ability to do that, and we have the opportunities in terms of we can mitigate the risks to public health in order to provide, hopefully, risk mitigation, more satisfied customers, that we have the means to support them to come back onto the train without being terrified that they're walking into a corona trap. We can mess around with the layouts of trains, we can mess around with the layouts of stations, we can make space for people. And we can develop technologies that can support public health. And some obvious examples, we could do track and tracing on trains. For example, you're pushed to a metal box. We can work out who's there, who's been there, and do tracing if it's then alerted that there's been a corona carrier. We can put in thermal cameras. We can improve air circulation and ventilation. We can mitigate risk effectively and rapidly. And we should be working on the how to do so, and why the government should be enabling us to do so in order to unlock train capacity again, rather than telling people they should be relying on their cars. And what we could also be doing, going back to the bigger picture, public health picture, is really integrating rail with walking and cycling in particular. Of course, active travel not just avoids people needing to use cars and gives them personal space, but it also has the public health benefits of reducing obesity, increasing exercise, and therefore is a benefit to the public purse and the NHS. We can also implement contactless, and we really should have implemented contactless services a long time ago, but we still could do it very quickly, again, with the incentive and support from all the players. I mean, ticketing and travel information are the obvious ones, but any kind of purchase could be done contactless. And rolling out those digital services would provide an improved passenger experience. And so to finish with a bright future, and I did say I would be an optimist, clean, lean, healthy machines, that's my catchphrase for trains. Can we deliver, that's my challenge, can we deliver decarbonisation? Can we adopt digital technologies? And can we come back strong after COVID? And with our clean, lean, healthy machines, I think the answer is yes. Yes, I do think we can. But we need to focus on how we're going to do that. And for me, the buzzword of collaboration is very good, but we need that openness to innovation, which I mentioned earlier as a learning from that industry survey, is we need to focus on a better, more pragmatic understanding of risk and need, and understand how we're going to adapt to that. So rail is very good, I think. We sit back, we think we're doing well. A new technology comes along, and we kind of miss a trick really in how it emerges. And then suddenly we're like, oh no, we've got to address this. And cybersecurity is a very good current example of that, where the rail industry needs to build in very strong cybersecurity protocols. How are we going to adopt digital technology safely and securely in order to exploit them to benefit the industry, while at the same time respecting the requirements of safety, privacy, and so on. And a big part for me is around this evolving technology. Technology is developing fast, and we, instead of taking a very dogmatic approach to risk of saying, actually, these are the standards, this is the regulatory environment, very rigid, we need to be far more flexible and far more pragmatic, so that we can actually build in the ability to adapt to technology as it develops. And there's a very pithy phrase: build in flexibility today to leverage the technology of tomorrow. And I won't take the credit for that. It's a very good phrase, but it's from one of my colleagues, and he said it to me, and I said I'm putting that straight into a presentation and keeping it forever. So there you go, I'll teach him. How could we do it? So how can we embed this innovation? It's really around, we need to shape the priorities and parameters of decision makers, particularly, but not only in government. It goes all the way up the chain in the rail industry itself as well. And really understanding that the innovation provides real benefits, and it can certainly be a real pathfinder in terms of how the railway can become more adaptable and flexible in itself, as well as adapting and flexing to new environments like the post-corona world. We also need to very clearly state the case of how we support all three of the major policy objectives: economic policy objectives, environmental policy objectives, social policy objectives, and rail's inherent benefits can support and directly, positively support all three of those policy objectives. I think we also need to make very clear that we should be seeing transport as a system of systems, and so they all interact, they all have multiple interfaces, and they're all related. ultimately in the sense of going back to this whole, we travel from A to B, we do it through a number of individual choices and based on a number of different variables at different times, different places, different contexts. We need to be better at understanding how rail can fit into that, how rail should fit into that, and how we could shape that system of systems so that rail is a major player, like I say, as the backbone of most journeys, particularly most long-term journeys. And the final point I want to make, and I'm pretty sure this is my final slide, if not, I'll have to carry on afterwards, but the final point I want to make goes back to what I said at the start, which I'm really pleased to be able to talk to young rail professionals, women in rail. To my mind, there is a massive issue deep set within the rail industry. And I was reminded, I was reading an academic paper from 1970, and I can hear two jaws drop, two of my colleagues who are listening to this. And it was around why the UK railway was so slow to move away from steam trains to diesel and electric trains in the between World War I and World War II, the 1920s, 1930s, but through the 1940s, 1950s into the 1960s. And one of the major reasons was it was a clubby atmosphere, and people knew what they liked and liked what they knew. And the rail to this day, the rail industry is still like that. We have a fundamental cultural issue and a mindset issue. Okay, we don't have a diverse workforce, and we desperately need one, and we definitely do if we want to see it become more innovative as well. Part one. Part two, the mindset is fixed. We have an industry where the vast majority of influential people have a certain way of seeing the world, and I'm probably going to get clubbed to death for saying all of this, so goodbye. We need that plurality of thought, plurality of vision, plurality of ideas when it comes to planning, designing the railway, and not just saying no to stuff because we don't understand it, the decision makers don't understand it, doesn't mean it's a bad thing, doesn't mean it's wrong. But there seems to be this ability for a groupthink to have taken hold at the top that says the railway can only go in this direction. That might be something to do with permanent way, of course, so that's a metaphor. The railway can only develop in this way, that's it. And that's not it, quite simply. And therefore, we need a lot more plurality of thought and diversity of workforce to make it a more open, a more engaged, a more welcoming and a more innovative industry. And so that's my killer endpoint, and it really is my killer endpoint. Thank you very much, Nicole. I'm going to shut up and you can take over now. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much, Alex. It was a very interesting talk, and you know, all the topics were covered brilliantly. It was very informative, and I'm pretty sure that we all got to learn a lot from it. We've got a few questions already from some of our members. So I'll start off by asking, first of all, my own question, which is, what is the best way of implementing academic research in the market? So what are the challenges associated with taking academic research into the industry?
That's a great topical question for us, Nicole, that's for sure. So academic research, fundamentally, it's there to help. It's there to provide the backbone of ideas and turning ideas into product, services, solutions. And obviously, we've got the UK Rail Research Innovation Network, which is a great example of a partnership between a number. I think we've got 15 universities now, 15 rail faculties at UK universities, and around 30 odd industry actors and client bodies. And it's around building a much greater sense of beneficial partnership between both sides, with an understanding that we each have something to offer. So at universities, we've got the ideas, we've got the research capability that can support and fast track, and that's the really important part, it can fast track and de-risk big ideas. And we can say not just help get that idea to market, but we can actually also say that idea it's just not going to fly, quite simply. So kill it, look for something else. And I think it's the de-risking of ideas so that you'll actually try stuff, and by working with the university you've got a better chance of splitting out the wheat from the chaff, of finding your winners and running with them and bringing them to market successfully.
Thank you. The next question is from Rachel, and she asks, what are the biggest challenges to realizing the opportunities afforded by the 4 technology areas you've outlined? and how can we overcome them?
Crikey, there's a. I think actually my instinct is to go with my last point again, which is we see a lot of enthusiasm in terms of the initial words of, oh, this sounds very interesting, we should do something about this. It's something that the government gets accused of a lot, and I think big companies can quite often get the same, which is this is a new technology, other industries are doing it, therefore we should, without any idea really as to, okay, well, what are the benefits we could get from this? What are the outcomes we're trying to achieve? And I think there's perhaps a soft part of the role for universities and research institutes is to be working with the industry at an earlier stage to have a better understanding of what these technologies actually mean and what they could actually do for the railway. What are the potential applications? And then if companies are interested, of then working in partnerships, finding those partners, not just universities, but also your startups, your innovators, your small companies who can be agile and flexible in playing with these technologies to try and find the relevant use case for them. And to my mind, there isn't really a sense of order when it comes to a true understanding of what the technology is, what the opportunity might be, then finding out what the use case is going to be for that technology, and then developing an effective translation of that technology aimed at that specific use case and implementing it. So I think it's having a clear strategy from the outset of what the technology is and how you're going to how you're going to bring it to market and why.
Thank you. The next question is from Heather Steele from BCRRE.
Yes.
The question is, with regard to digitalization, how can rail use digital solutions to address issues of connected and sustainable supply chains beyond delivering services to customers?
Yes, and well, that is a very good question. That's something we've been doing work on at the university when it comes to supporting not just the better railway, but actually how it can improve the productivity of the rail industry as well. And this is some work we've been doing as part of the rail supply group, which is how can we boost the productivity and efficiency of the rail industry, because relatively our industry is productive, but it's not as productive as other technology-rich, research-rich sectors, and we do need to improve that. And I think there is a role for universities in that regard, in helping businesses and helping supply chains to understand how we could apply technologies. Robotics springs to mind as one, but cloud processing, data analytics also. How can we use these technologies to create a better operating model for your business? How can you use them to provide better support for the companies that you supply? And this is a two-way street. And I think when it comes to strengthening supply chains and the role of digital technologies in that, there's a lot that can be learned from on both sides of the coin. I think big companies can learn from the agility and flexibility and open approach of small companies who will supply them. But likewise, small companies can learn from the big companies when it comes to the rigor and the process approach to using technology in tandem with good management, good project management, good resource management, in order to provide improved services. Because fundamentally, I suppose it comes down to one point, which is the rail supply industry is here to serve, support, and deliver an effective, efficient, reliable railway. And digital technologies are going to have a role in each of those parts to improve the railway.
Thank you. That brings us on to our next question related to infrastructure funding and digitalization funding. It's a question by Miotrak Vidakovic. The question is, do you think infrastructure managers and TOCs are planning to increase their budgets for more digitalization in rail?
Well, that's a great question, and obviously someone was paying attention to my plea to consider, if we're doing innovation, look at the demand side as well. And the good news is quite simply, yes, there is definitely increased focus from the demand side, from infrastructure managers, from client bodies, from governments, investing in digital solutions, and the UK is a great example. We've of course seen in control period 6, so that's the settlement for Network Rail for 2019 to 24, £245 million invested in the research and development programme for Network Rail, which is a vast amount by comparison to previous settlements. A massive chunk of that is focused on digital technologies and digital techniques, processes and solutions that are going to improve the efficiency and reliability of Network Rail's assets, various asset classes across their infrastructure. So from the UK, yes, immediately Network Rail are investing. We know that other infrastructure projects, not just HS2, but overseas, places like Rail Baltica, we know that SNCF with their TGV network are looking at the development of digital technologies that will provide a more reliable railway, improved capacity, improved signalling, traffic management, all of those kinds of things. It's happening. And one other thing, the sector deal, the UK sector deal, an agreement between the UK government and the rail industry focused on digitalisation as the main theme. So we know that there is full recognition in government and industry that digital solutions can help us to provide a more efficient, more reliable railway.
Thank you. The next question is by Tim Milford, and the question is, to what extent is the rail industry risk averse, and does this act as a blocker for innovation?
Lots and yes. The rail is risk averse. I suppose I should be fair, actually. We have a more dogmatic approach to risk than I think we should have. And that's come from the best of intentions. That's come from us having to address major issues with safety over the last 20 and a bit years. We had a number of bad train accidents, the late 1990s, early 2000s. They had to be addressed in order to maintain and rebuild public confidence in the railway, and therefore we had to have a complete no-nonsense approach to risk for health and safety purposes. And it did the job, and it made our railway the safest in Europe, if not the world, which has been a fantastic turnaround. But what it's then done has embedded a culture where you do not take risks, because we are a safety critical industry and we are here to protect lives. And my message is not, right, we've got to go back to the old ways. That's not the case at all. We have to change our perception of risk. So it's absolutely critical that we maintain full confidence in the safety of the railway. And we can do that. And we can do that while taking a more pragmatic approach to what appropriate levels of risk are. So I'm not saying stop the dogmatic approach. Let's take a bit of risk. Oh, it may affect, we may cause an accident. I'm not saying that it's risk that causes accidents. It's risk in terms of trialing new technologies, trialing investment, accepting that there is risk with innovation, but the rewards are great, and taking a much more pragmatic approach to balancing the potential rewards against potential risks of losing some money to go through a development process.
Thank you very much. The next question is by Hannah, and the question is, how do we combat the need for rail transport against the existing rail network capacity issues?
Well, obviously, I fully support building railways everywhere and converting roads to railways. But we have a huge opportunity with digital technology to at least not just, I think a lot of stock has been placed on, for example, systems like ETCS, digital signalling systems, providing huge amounts of capacity. I think what they really do is provide the reliability and certainty first and foremost. And there will be capacity benefits for sure, but they aren't going to be doubling capacity. But we can certainly optimize our network to provide more capacity. I think that's an absolute given. I think once we have reliability, we will increase further demand for rail transport, because the most important thing for people isn't how quickly they get there, it's getting somewhere when they know when they're expecting to get there, so they can plan their lives according to our timetable, which would be a good thing. When that happens and demand does increase, then yes, we are going to have to build out of this. It's not going to be longer trains, it's going to be more capacity, and that means more railway lines, which is a good thing, let's face it. But what we can also do is actually integrate our planning of railways with broader transport planning, with our spatial planning systems, with our economic planning, so that we're actually designing transport to fit with the real broader systems need of how people work and live. So here in Birmingham, it would be around identifying not just where you need new railway lines, but where you might perhaps augment rail capacity with, say, improved parking at a nearby railway station to encourage people to use other alternatives to try and spread the load more evenly across the network. And I think the most effective way we can improve and optimize train capacity is to have that better systems level integration across the wider network and work more closely with cycling, with buses, with lots more trams and light rail as well, to make best use of the network as appropriate.
Thank you. There's another question which is on a similar topic. The question is by Daniel, and the question is, you mentioned that attitudes need to change both within the industry and outside of it. Do you have any thoughts on how to change the transport users' mindset away from personal mobility to rail and the wider public transport solution, bearing in mind that many people prefer the autonomy of personal transport? Changing customer habits is really at the core of the transport solution, isn't it?
And it's a absolutely fair point, and I suppose I should confess that while obviously I think we'd all like to say it's all about carrots rather than sticks, I'd be fairly relaxed about using big sticks, and I suppose maybe I've become a not a convert, but certainly I am very conscious that we need to be pushing more around the impact of climate change, and we need to perhaps be a bit more controversial in order to make people understand that we do have to make these changes. We can't just be nice, and we can't just rely on nudge theory and being helpful. We do need to act more with bigger sticks, quite simply. So we need congestion charging, we need much more effective road pricing. We need to price people out of cars, quite simply. We can scare them. We can take the cigarettes approach, you know, with diseased lungs and things on cigarette packets, and tax and extra tax on top for good measure. And perhaps maybe it's time we did that. Perhaps maybe we need to start banning cars from more streets, from making it more difficult to be a driver. And I think, you know, walking and cycling around North Birmingham, where I live, and cars are coming back with a vengeance. They're going faster than ever. It's dangerous and it's frightening, and the fumes are back as well. And quite simply, it's a case of the cars get to drive fast, they get to use up lots of road capacity, and they get to emit, and there doesn't seem to be an equitable balance in terms of the use of precious road space in cities, and the use of the air that's around us and supplies our lungs, and it doesn't seem particularly equitable. So actually, yes, I think it's big stick time, and I think we need active measures from government to change people, not just change people's minds, but price them out of cars, I'm afraid. Sorry.
Thank you. I think we've gone over time a little bit. Are you happy to take a couple of more questions?
I can take a couple more if you're happy, Nikhil. I'm in the mood now.
Okay, thanks. Cool. Okay, the next question is from Zoe, and the question is, as a relatively new person coming into the rail sector, I totally agree with the mindset and diversity. How do you think we can overcome a mindset change to those that are just stuck in their ways?
Excellent. So this got through. Good. Well, firstly, it's great to hear about people entering the railway industry. That's always a pleasing thing, and it is a fantastic industry. It's hugely rewarding. Lots of opportunities for travel, for learning, making friends, having great knowledge, great experiences, and you can earn a good wage too. So it is a superb industry, and it would be even better if it was even more welcoming and open, and it would thrive more with a more diverse population in it. So how do we do that? Well, I think it needs an activist approach from the top. I think there are, I've seen occasions where, you know, if you don't say the right thing, and I have suffered for saying my mind and it not fitting in with the perceived wisdom of the context and therefore suffering as a result of it. And I'm afraid if I can get pushed out like that, then it's probably even easier for other people to also suffer that experience as well. And the railway is going to have to address this groupthink. I think it's quite simply a case for a number of leaders and influencers and seniors need to take a stand. I think quite simply, I just don't know any other way. It needs people to take personal responsibility and to use their position to advance the greater good. It's as simple as that, Nicole. And Zoe, sorry. I think that's what we have to do. We have a duty. Those of us who are a bit older and who can give a voice and try and push that, we should all be doing that, and we should all be doing it far more.
Thank you very much. The next question is from Shona, and the question is, I completely agree with your final words on creating a more diverse workforce. How do you think we can attract a more diverse workforce into the rail sector in terms of recruitment?
And that's a really good point, and it's the flip side of the coin, isn't it? We are going to be, to attract a diverse workforce, we need to look like a diverse workforce and look like we want a diverse workforce, quite simply. So we need a workforce that reflects the people it serves, the communities we serve. We need to make the change in the industry, like a number of other institutions and industries have done. We need to be going out as universities. We go out to try and recruit students from everywhere. From all communities, all sectors, all countries, and we have a diverse group of students. But that doesn't translate into the UK rail industry like it does into a number of other industries, other rail industries around the world in quite the same way. And I don't know exactly why, but I do feel that if the industry looked more diverse, it would become a self-perpetuating experience, and we would see a truly diverse workforce, and then hopefully it will allow innovation especially to flourish, and then we can have more big ideas and make them the reality. From a recruitment perspective, I think there are some systemic issues around engineering more broadly. I think there is something around primary secondary education that people children get put off engineering, and rail just doesn't even go look in, full stop. And it's certainly perceived as perhaps a traditional heavy engineering type of industry, rather than a technology and research rich engineering industry, which is hugely exciting and far better than gaming software and all that kind of boring stuff. Who wouldn't rather play with trains? Come on, seriously?
True.
Thank you.
Okay, so one last question on COVID-19. The question from Fabey. The question is, is there collaboration between countries to improve rail services during COVID-19?
I can't speak. There is, I'm aware, we have relationship as the UK rail cluster. We have relationship with other rail clusters around Europe. And I know that countries in Western, Central, Eastern Europe mainland are working collaboratively to reopen, especially the cross-international services. I know Austria have reopened services with Germany, France, Switzerland and Italy and Croatia just recently. I know France, Spain have reopened the high-speed line with services Paris-Barcelona each way, both national operators. From a UK perspective, it wouldn't surprise me if we were a little behind the curve on that, unfortunately. Yeah, I'm afraid. Okay. Can we have something optimistic to end on rather than that? I feel really, I'm really down now.
Right. Okay. I guess I'll ask the final one in that case. An optimistic question. So my question is related to digital twins and virtual replicas of our railway services. So what are we doing in that regard, and how are we going to proceed in the future and enable them to implement them in predictive maintenance, traffic management, etc. So how is it going to look like in the
Well, I tell you what, I'll be particularly optimistic and say hopefully some bright young sparks on our PhD students might grab the opportunity and turn it into a reality with some excellent ideas and excellent work. And they'll be at the forefront of converting that technology. And in all seriousness, well, no, that was serious. In addition to that, I would say it's a great example of one of a huge number of technological developments that can really change the face of how we plan and deliver an effective operating railway. You're well aware of some of the digital twin work, but you're certainly aware of the research that's going on at our university. I think what's particularly exciting is that a number of companies have picked up on the value of that research and have understood the potential use cases for it. And I suppose what my final point will be is, and that really emphasises the need for the stronger links between us as a university and the rail supply industry, and them seeing the value of what we're doing, the research we're doing, and the opportunities it opens for them. You know, we don't do this for fun. We do this research with the aim of it creating a real world impact 5, 10, 20 years down the line. And this research around digital twins for the railway will lead to a fundamental reshaping of how you design timetables, how you design all your impacts on a railway, and how you can filter those out so that you can significantly reduce the numbers of risk involved in implementing a timetable, rescheduling, rediagramming train paths at short notice, all that kind of stuff. The use cases are clear, the technology is developing fast, and hopefully the transformation when it comes in will be significant and show the true value of it.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Alex. I guess that's all the questions that were asked. And thank you everyone for joining us today. I see a lot of thank you in the comment section now. So everyone's very happy to attend the talk and they got to learn a lot. So thank you everyone. Thank you, Alex. And we'll see you in the next talk soon. Thanks.